The universal gesture. Dr. James Chen stood nervously in the grand hall of the Xeraxian royal palace. The massive crystal walls sparkled with rainbow lights, making him feel even smaller than he already did. As Earth's top expert in alien languages, he should have felt confident. Instead, his hands were sweating inside his formal diplomatic suit. "Remember, Dr. Chen, this is just a standard greeting ceremony," Ambassador Williams whispered beside him. "The war ended 6 months ago. We're here to build peace." James nodded, touching the small metal ring in his pocket. It was his grandmother's last gift before she passed away. A simple band with strange markings that looked almost alien. She had always encouraged his interest in space and other cultures. Carrying it made him feel braver. The palace doors opened with a musical chime. Queen Xtheira of the Xeraxian Empire entered, her crystalline crown catching the light. She was tall, like all Xeraxians, with iridescent scales and 4 arms. But unlike the stern faces James had seen in diplomatic broadcasts, her expression seemed curious and intelligent. Following protocol, James stepped forward to perform the traditional greeting. But as he moved, he tripped on his ceremonial robe. His hand shot to his pocket for balance, accidentally pulling out his grandmother's ring. The hall went completely silent. Queen Xtheira's eyes widened, all 4 of her hands lifting in surprise. James realized he was holding the ring out toward her, exactly at heart level, which had some special meaning in Xeraxian culture that he couldn't remember right now. "This is unexpected," Queen Xtheira said in perfect English, her voice musical and surprised, "but not unwelcome." Ambassador Williams made a choking sound. "Your Majesty, there seems to be a misunderstanding." "The human diplomat shows great courage," one of the Xeraxian court advisors announced loudly, offering the sacred circle at the first meeting. "It hasn't been done in 10,000 years." James tried to explain, but Queen Xtheira was already moving. With graceful steps, she approached him. Her lower right hand gently took the ring, while her upper hands performed an intricate gesture he didn't recognize. "I accept your proposal, Dr. James Chen of Earth," she said, her scales shimmering with what looked like happiness. "Our union will bring a new era of peace between our peoples." "Proposal?" James squeaked, his linguistic expertise failing him completely. The hall erupted in musical tones, the Xeraxian equivalent of applause. Ambassador Williams looked like she might faint. The court advisor was already announcing celebration plans to the gathered nobles. "Did you not intend this?" Queen Xtheira asked quietly, so only James could hear. There was something in her voice, amusement, interest. "The offering of a ring-shaped token at first meeting is our most ancient and sacred form of marriage proposal, traditionally only attempted by the bravest or most foolish of suitors." James opened his mouth to explain, but then he saw the look in her eyes. She wasn't angry. She seemed intrigued. And he suddenly remembered a crucial fact about Xeraxian culture. Refusing or taking back a formal proposal was considered a death-worthy insult. "I look forward to learning more about your customs, Your Majesty," he managed to say diplomatically. Queen Xtheira's scales rippled with color in what James recognized as amusement. "As do I, future consort. As do I. I suspect this will be the most interesting diplomatic arrangement in quite some time." As the celebration broke out around them, James realized his life had just become far more complicated than any linguistic challenge had prepared him for. And somehow, judging by the calculating look in Queen Xtheira's eyes, she might have plans of her own about this accidental proposal. Diplomatic chaos. The emergency meeting room on the Terran Dawn was in complete chaos. Ambassador Williams paced back and forth, her usual calm completely gone. 3 holographic screens showed angry Earth officials, all talking at once. "Do you understand what you've done, Dr. Chen?" Williams stopped in front of James, who sat quietly in his chair. "You've accidentally engaged yourself to the ruler of humanity's most powerful alien neighbor." James touched his grandmother's ring, which now felt strangely light in his pocket after Queen Xthera had replaced it with a Xeraxian engagement crystal. There has to be a way to explain the mistake without causing offense. Impossible. The Xeraxian cultural expert on the main screen shook his head. Refusing a royal proposal is punishable by death under their oldest laws. Even suggesting it was a mistake could restart the war. James remembered the way Queen Xthera had looked at him. Not angry or offended, but curious. Maybe even pleased. What if we don't try to undo it? Everyone stopped talking at once. Are you suggesting, Ambassador Williams said slowly, that you actually go through with marrying the alien queen? Before James could answer, a musical chime filled the room. Queen Xthera's hologram appeared, her scales shimmering with formal colors. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important, she said, though her slight smile suggested she knew exactly what they were discussing. I wanted to speak with my future consort about tomorrow's engagement ceremony. The Earth officials quickly disappeared from their screens, leaving James alone with the ambassador and the Queen's projection. Your Majesty, James stood up, trying to remember all his diplomatic training. I hope you understand that this situation is unexpected for us. Of course. Xthera's scales rippled with what James was starting to recognize as amusement. Just as unexpected as a human diplomat being brave enough to make the sacred proposal. My nobles are quite impressed. Some are even a bit afraid. Afraid? James asked. They think you planned this, Xthera explained. That Earth somehow learned of our most sacred traditions and sent their smartest diplomat to bind our kingdoms together. They believe you are either brilliant or dangerous. Possibly both. James saw Ambassador Williams' eyes widen with sudden understanding. If everyone thought this was a clever diplomatic move. The peace between our peoples is still new, Xthera continued. This union, accident or not, could strengthen it. Unless, of course, you wish to refuse. Her tone was light, but James caught the warning in it. No refusal, Your Majesty, James said quickly. I look forward to learning more about your customs. And about you, he added silently, surprised to realize he meant it. Excellent. Xthera's scales shifted to pleased colors. I've already arranged for your cultural training to begin tomorrow. I think you'll find Xeraxian engagement traditions quite interesting. With a musical laugh, her hologram disappeared. Ambassador Williams sat down heavily. Well, Dr. Chen, it seems you're going to be Earth's first human-alien royal consort. Try not to start any more interstellar incidents before tomorrow. James nodded, his mind already racing. Queen Xthera clearly had her own plans for this marriage. The question was, what were they? And why did he find himself actually looking forward to finding out? Cultural crash course. James stared at the holographic display, trying to memorize the complex patterns of Xeraxian royal greetings. His head hurt from 4 hours of non-stop cultural training, but he couldn't afford to make another mistake. Again, said Cathal, his Xeraxian instructor. The elderly alien scales were set in teaching pattern colors. Show me the morning gratitude to your future queen. James carefully moved his arms in the pattern he'd learned. Left hand up, right hand curved, bow at precisely 30 degrees. A sharp pain hit his shoulder. He spun around to see a ceremonial dart stuck in the wall behind him, right where his head had been a second ago. Very good. Cathal's scales flickered with approval. Your combat instincts are improving. Combat instincts. James pulled the dart from the wall. I thought we were practicing greetings. Every greeting is also a defense pattern, Cathal explained. As royal consort, many will try to kill you. You must always be ready. Before James could process this disturbing information, the room's door slid open. Queen Xthera entered, wearing simpler robes than at their first meeting. Leave us, Cathal, she commanded. The instructor bowed and disappeared. James tried to remember the proper greeting for this time of day, but Xthera waved it away. No need for formality right now. I came to see how you're adapting. Well, I just learned that people might try to kill me, James said. So that's new. Exthyra's scales rippled with amusement. I've been studying human culture too, you know. For years, actually. Your species fascinates me. This surprised James. Really? Why? Humans adapt so quickly. She moved to the window, looking out at the crystal spires of her city. You went from primitive technology to space travel in less than 3 centuries. Some of my nobles fear that speed. They think humans are dangerous. And what do you think? James asked. Exthyra turned to face him, her expression curious. I think change can be good. The old ways aren't always the best ways. She picked up one of the training darts. Did you know that in the past 1,000 years, no royal marriage has been for love? All political arrangements, carefully planned for years. And then I stumbled in and accidentally proposed, James said. Yes. Exthyra's scales shifted to a color he hadn't seen before. The first genuine proposal in generations, even if unintended. It's causing quite a stir. A loud crash interrupted them. 3 masked figures burst through the window, weapons ready. James reacted instantly, using the greeting movement he'd just learned to deflect a dart. To his surprise, it worked perfectly. Exthyra moved like lightning, her 4 arms becoming a blur. In seconds, 2 attackers were down. The third raised a weapon at James, but he remembered his training. Morning gratitude motion, duck, spin, and the attacker hit the floor. Very good, Exthyra said calmly as guards rushed in. You're learning quickly. Does this happen often? James asked, heart racing. Traditional nobles opposing change. Yes, but don't worry. She smiled, showing just a hint of sharp teeth. I chose you for a reason, even if you didn't know you were being chosen. Rest now. Tomorrow's lessons will be even more interesting. As James watched her leave, he realized 2 things. First, he was definitely going to need more combat training. And second, the alien queen might be even more fascinating than the cultural lessons he was learning. Royal Revelations. James walked through the royal gardens, amazed by the crystal flowers that chimed softly in the breeze. After a week of intense training, Cthal had finally given him an afternoon off. He needed the break to think. Something wasn't adding up about his situation. The Queen's reactions seemed too perfect, too planned. He touched the Zyraxian engagement crystal she had given him, its surface warm against his skin. A movement caught his eye. 2 noble lords were talking behind a large crystal formation, their voices carrying in the garden's perfect acoustics. James's training in the Zyraxian language was paying off. He could understand them clearly. The human must not survive the first trial, one lord said. The Queen cannot be allowed to cement this alliance. Our trading monopoly with Earth depends on continued tension. The other agreed. Peace is bad for business. James carefully backed away, but bumped into someone. He spun around to find Queen Exthyra standing there, watching him with an unreadable expression. Walk with me, she said simply. It wasn't a request. They moved deeper into the gardens, away from prying ears. Crystal flowers created a musical barrier around them, masking their conversation. You heard them, Exthyra stated. Yes. James looked at her carefully. You knew about this already, didn't you? Her scales shifted to a pattern he was learning to recognize as approval. Very good. You're beginning to think like a royal consort. Those nobles, they profit from the war, James said. They want to stop our marriage to keep the conflict going. Correct again. Exthyra touched a crystal flower, making it chime. For centuries, certain houses have grown rich from tension between our peoples. They control trade routes, weapons contracts, reconstruction projects. And my accidental proposal gave you a way to break their power, James realized. That's why you accepted so quickly. Exthyra's scales flickered with complex emotions. Initially, yes. Your clumsy proposal was perfect. They couldn't oppose it without insulting ancient traditions. She paused, looking at him intently. But you've surprised me, James Chen. You learn quickly. You adapt. You see beneath the surface. You could have chosen anyone for this plan, James said. Why keep me? Because you did something no one has done in centuries, she replied. You made me laugh. Real laughter, not diplomatic courtesy. Her scales shifted to that new color he'd seen before. And you remind me that change can be good. A distant explosion rocked the garden. Alarms began to sound. The noble houses are moving faster than expected. Xthiera said calmly, drawing a hidden weapon. They fear how well you're adapting to our ways. James automatically moved into a defensive stance beside her, their training falling into place. What's our move? Our move. Her scales flickered with pleasure at his choice of words. First, we survive. Then we show them why they were right to be afraid. As royal guards rushed toward them, and more explosions lit up the crystal garden, James realized something important. What had started as an accidental proposal was becoming something else entirely, a partnership that could reshape two civilizations. The first trial. The crystal forest stretched endlessly before James, its transparent trees reflecting the light of 3 moons. His survival suit beeped quietly, warning him about the freezing temperatures. This was the first trial. Traditionally a hunt to prove his worth as a royal consort. Remember, Kithal's voice crackled through his communicator. You must return with a crystal beast to prove your worth. No one has ever passed this trial without making a kill. James checked his weapons, standard hunting gear that felt awkward in his hands. The noble houses had insisted on traditional weapons, probably hoping he'd get himself killed trying to use them. A distant howl echoed through the crystal trees. James moved carefully, remembering his training. Crystal beasts were legendary predators, nearly invisible in this environment. They hunted by sound, using the forest's natural acoustics to track prey. Something large moved nearby, its crystalline form blending perfectly with the trees. James raised his weapon, then stopped. The creature wasn't attacking. It was singing. The sound reminded him of the musical patterns in Xeraxian speech. On impulse, he touched a crystal tree beside him, making it ring in harmony with the creature's song. The beast appeared fully now, a magnificent creature the size of a small car, its body made of living crystal. It turned to James, singing a complex pattern. Fascinating, James whispered. He tapped another tree, matching the beast's song. His linguistics training was paying off in an unexpected way. More beasts emerged from the forest, all singing. James realized they weren't just making noise, they were communicating. The patterns matched ancient Xeraxian dialects he'd studied. For the next hour, James forgot about the trial. He sat in the crystal snow, trading songs with the beasts, learning their language. They were intelligent, curious creatures. One even let him touch its crystalline fur. When dawn approached, the largest beast nudged him gently. To his surprise, it broke off one of its smaller crystals and placed it in his hands. A gift. James's communicator crackled. Time is up, Kthal announced. Return to the trial grounds. The gathered nobles muttered in disapproval when James emerged without a bloody trophy. But they fell silent when Queen Xthiera stepped forward, her scales shimmering with interest. The trial demands proof of worth, James said formally in ancient Xeraxian. I bring not a kill, but a gift freely given. He held up the crystal, which sang softly in harmony with the forest. Impossible, one noble whispered. The beasts are mindless killers. No, Xthiera said, her scales bright with joy. They are like us, proud, intelligent, misunderstood. She took the singing crystal. For centuries, we've killed them to prove our worth. Today, someone finally listened to them instead. She faced the gathered nobles. The first trial is passed, not through strength of arms, but strength of mind. My future consort brings change, as he was meant to do. James caught the satisfied look in her eyes. Somehow he suspected she'd known all along that he would find a different way. As the crystal beast's song echoed through the forest behind him, he wondered what other changes this accidental engagement would bring. Hearts and minds. James sat in the royal library, surrounded by ancient Zyrexian texts that glowed softly in the dim light. After his success with the crystal beasts, Queen Exthera had granted him access to records few humans had ever seen. "I find you in the library again." Thayera's voice made him look up. She wore casual robes today, her scales set in relaxed patterns. Most warriors would be training with weapons. "Knowledge is its own kind of weapon," James replied, then smiled. "Besides, I'm still terrible with that ceremonial spear." Exthera's scales rippled with amusement as she sat beside him. "What are you studying today?" "Zyrexian governance." He showed her the glowing text. "Your people make decisions differently than humans. We focus on individual rights, but you consider the collective first." "And which is better?" she asked, watching him carefully. "Neither. Both." James touched the ancient pages. "That's what I'm learning. Humans could benefit from thinking more about community impact, and maybe Zyrexians could consider individual needs more." "Dangerous thoughts," Exthera said softly. "Many nobles fear exactly this kind of exchange of ideas." A servant rushed in before James could respond. "Your Majesty, the outer colonies are reporting food shortages. The noble houses are hoarding supplies." Thayera's scales darkened with anger, but James touched her arm gently. "Let me help," he said. "I have an idea." Hours later, they stood in the royal broadcast chamber. James had spent weeks learning how to adjust his translator to convey emotional subtleties in Zyrexian speech. Now it was time to test it. "People of the Zyrexian Empire," he began, his words carrying to every colony. "I speak to you not as an outsider, but as someone who has learned the beauty of your ways. Your strength lies in community, in caring for all. Yet some would let their neighbors starve for profit." He described the crystal beasts, how they shared resources and protected their weakest members. As he spoke, Exthera's scales shifted to a pattern he'd never seen, pride mixed with something deeper. "The noble houses claim to protect tradition," James continued. "But the oldest texts speak of sharing, of collective prosperity. I've seen your true strength. Now show it to everyone." Within hours, public pressure forced the noble houses to release their hoarded supplies. Colony reports showed communities organizing shared distribution networks, working together in ways that bypassed the nobles' control. "You're changing them," Exthera said later, as they watched supply ships launch. "Not through force, but through understanding." "We're changing each other," James corrected. "Every day I learn more about your ways, I understand better who I can become." Exthera's scales shifted to that special color he now recognized, the one reserved for him alone. Perhaps that's why the ancient traditions speak of royal marriage as bringing transformation, though I doubt they imagined quite this much change. As they stood watching the ships, their hands touched briefly. And in that moment, both realized their accidental engagement had become something neither had expected, a partnership that could reshape two worlds. The second trial. The mining colony of Krylix 9 buzzed with tension as James walked through its crystalline corridors. This was his second trial, resolving a dispute between two powerful mining guilds that threatened the Empire's economy. "The Crystal Heart Guild has stolen our mining rights," the leader of the Mountain Shapers Guild shouted, his scales flashing angry colors. "They abandoned their claims," the Crystal Heart representative argued back. "Our people need work." James studied the holomaps showing the disputed territories. Both guilds were technically right, which made them both wrong. He'd spent days researching similar conflicts in Earth's history, looking for solutions. "Show me the mines," he said simply. The underground caverns were vast, filled with precious crystals that powered both human and Zyrexian ships. James noticed something interesting. Each guild had different mining techniques. The Mountain Shapers cut precise, geometric patterns. The Crystal Heart Guild worked in flowing, organic shapes. Your techniques are completely different, James said thoughtfully. Have you ever combined them? Both guild leaders looked confused. James touched the cave wall, remembering his time with the crystal beasts. The crystals respond to harmony. What if instead of fighting over territory, you work together? Mountain shapers cut the initial paths. Crystal Heart follows with detailed work. Share the profits equally. Impossible, someone shouted. Our guilds have been rivals for generations. James tapped the cave wall, creating a resonating note. Like this crystal, your people are stronger together than apart. The old writings speak of collaboration, not competition. He spent hours showing them how their techniques could complement each other. To everyone's surprise, the combined method yielded more crystals than either guild could mine alone. This is unprecedented, the mountain shaper leader admitted, but it could work. As the guilds drafted a cooperation agreement, James noticed Queen Exthera watching from the shadows, her scales glowing with satisfaction. You're learning, she said later as they walked through the now peaceful colony. Most would have chosen one side. Like with the crystal beasts, James replied, sometimes you have to listen for the harmony that's already there. The noble houses won't like this, Exthera warned. You're breaking centuries of tradition. No, James touched the Zyraxian engagement crystal he wore. We're remembering older traditions, the ones about working together. Exthera's scales shifted to his special color. You know, when you first offered that ring, I accepted partly to challenge the old order. I didn't expect. Neither did I, James said softly. The accidental proposal had become something real, something that could change not just their lives, but two civilizations. Behind them, the combined songs of two mining guilds echoed through the crystal caves, creating new harmonies no one had heard before. Conspiracy unveiled. The assassin's blade missed James by inches, embedding itself in the wall behind him. He spun around, using the defensive moves Kithel had drilled into him, and faced his attacker. But something was wrong. The assassin wasn't Zyraxian. Human. James gasped, recognizing the Earth-made combat suit. The assassin struck again, but years of diplomatic training had taught James to read body language. He dodged the attack and grabbed the assassin's arm, using their momentum to pin them down. Royal guards burst into the room, led by Queen Exthera herself. Her scales blazed with battle colors as she personally secured the attacker. A human assassin in the royal palace, one guard said. The Earth government. No, James interrupted, picking up something that had fallen from the assassin's pocket. It was a credit chip marked with both human and Zyraxian symbols. This goes deeper. Hours later, in Exthera's secure war room, they examined the evidence. The assassin had connections to both human corporations and Zyraxian noble houses. Look at these transaction records, James pointed to the holographic display. The same group that profits from tension between our peoples. They have members on both sides. The Shadow Coalition, Exthera named them, her scales dark with anger. They'd been playing both sides, keeping our species afraid of each other. Your accidental proposal threatened everything they built. And my survival of the trials made them desperate, James added. He looked at the data again. Wait, these shipping routes, they match the crystal smuggling patterns we found during the mining dispute. Exthera's scales flickered with realization. The coalition has been stealing resources, blaming each side for the thefts, keeping us distrustful. A blast rocked the palace. Alarms screamed throughout the complex. Multiple attacks. A guard reported. Both human and Zyraxian ships working together. They're making their move, Exthera said, drawing her weapons. If they kill us both, they can blame either side and restart the war. James activated the palace communications. We need to warn everyone. Both humans and Zyraxians need to know they're being manipulated. Together, Exthera asked, her scales showing his special color even in this crisis. Together, James agreed. They ran toward the command center, guards forming up around them. What had started as an accidental proposal had become a fight for peace itself. As they moved through the palace, James realized something important. The coalition had made a crucial mistake. By trying to keep humans and Xeraxians apart, they had created the very thing they feared most, a true partnership that could expose their lies. Now they just had to survive long enough to tell everyone the truth. The final trial. The ancient ceremony chamber glowed with crystalline light as James and Xthera prepared for the third and final trial. After exposing the Shadow Coalition's plot, they had earned the right to attempt the sacred unity ritual, a challenge that would test their ability to work as one. No mixed species couple has ever attempted this, Cthulhu warned them. The crystalline resonance must be perfect, or he didn't need to finish. They both knew failure meant death. The chamber held two crystal pillars, each tuned to their species' natural frequencies. James took his position by the human-tuned crystal, while Xthera stood before the Xeraxian one. "Remember what we learned," Xthera said softly, her scales showing both confidence and concern. "About harmony." James nodded, thinking of the crystal beasts and the mining guilds. Every challenge had taught them something about working together. The ritual began. The crystals hummed, creating discordant frequencies that made James's teeth ache. Their task was to bring the sounds into harmony through perfectly synchronized movements and thoughts. James started the human resonance pattern he'd practiced for weeks. Xthera began the ancient Xeraxian movements. At first, the sounds clashed painfully. "It's not working," someone whispered from the watching crowd. "Their species are too different." But James remembered something from his linguistic studies. "Different doesn't mean incompatible," he said to Xthera. "Like the mining guilds, we just need to find the right combination." Instead of forcing human patterns to match Xeraxian ones, they began creating something new. James wove earth music into his movements, while Xthera incorporated human gestures into her traditional forms. The crystal's frequencies shifted, finding new harmonies never heard before. The chamber filled with light as their patterns synchronized, not by becoming the same, but by complementing each other perfectly. "Impossible," Cthulhu gasped. "They're creating a new resonance pattern." The final movement brought them together between the pillars. As their hands touched, the crystals erupted in rainbow light. The chamber filled with music that combined human and Xeraxian tones into something beautiful and new. "The trial is past," Cthulhu announced in awe. "They have achieved true unity." Xthera's scales showed James's special color, brighter than ever. "We did it," she said softly, "not by changing who we are, but by growing together." James touched the engagement crystal he wore. What had started as an accident had led them here, proving that their species could do more than just coexist. They could create something entirely new together. New beginnings. The royal wedding chamber sparkled with combined human and Xeraxian decorations. Crystal flowers sang softly, intertwined with earth roses. Representatives from both species filled the hall, watching as ancient tradition merged with new possibilities. James stood before the gathering, wearing ceremonial robes that combined earth formal wear with Xeraxian royal patterns. The engagement crystal at his throat hummed in harmony with the chamber's crystals. Queen Xthera entered, her scales shifting through rainbow patterns before settling on that special color, the one that had become known throughout the empire as the bridge shade, symbolizing unity between their peoples. A year ago, Xthera addressed the crowd. "A human diplomat accidentally offered me a ring. Today, we prove that sometimes the best traditions start by mistake." The Shadow Coalition's plot had been exposed, their members arrested on both worlds. Trade flourished between species, with the mining guild's new combined techniques, leading to prosperity for all. "The ancient texts speak of unity," James said, using his perfected translator to convey the emotional harmonics of Xeraxian speech. but they never specified what kind. Perhaps they were waiting for us to discover it ourselves. They exchanged vows in both languages, their words creating musical patterns in the crystal chamber. The crystal beasts, now recognized as intelligent beings, sang from their forest sanctuary. The combined mining guilds added their harmonies. "Let this union stand as proof," Xtheora declared, her scales brilliant with joy. "That difference brings strength. Change brings growth. And sometimes the best future comes from embracing the unexpected." As they sealed their vows, the chamber erupted in both human applause and Xeraxian musical tones. Earth roses and crystal flowers rained down, their scents mixing in the air. Later, at the celebration, James and Xtheora watched humans and Xeraxians mingling, sharing stories and customs. "Was any of this in your original plan?" James asked her teasingly. "When you accepted my accidental proposal?" Xtheora's scales rippled with amusement and love. "I planned to change the Empire," she admitted. "I didn't plan on changing myself." She touched his hand with all four of hers. "Sometimes the best plans are the ones we never made." As the three moons rose over the crystal city, their light reflected off new buildings that combined human and Xeraxian architecture. In the royal library, James's grandmother's ring sat in a place of honor beside ancient Xeraxian artifacts, a simple object that had accidentally started a revolution of unity. The accidental proposal had become something far greater, proof that the best traditions were the ones they would create together.